President Trump meeting with the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister of Canada, and talked about why it is that we want to make more things that we're now getting from Canada right here in America. Number 33.
We are the largest client of the United States in the totality of all the goods. So we are the largest client of the United States. We have a tremendous auto sector between the two of us, and the changes that made have been helpful. 50% of a car that comes from Canada is American. That's not like anywhere else in the world. And to your question about is there one thing? No, this is a bigger discussion. There are much bigger forces involved, and this will take some time and some discussions, and that's why we're here, to have those discussions, and that is represented by who's sitting around the table.
See, the conflict is, and this is very friendly. We're not. This is not going to be like we had another little blow up with somebody else. That was a much different. This is a very friendly conversation, but we want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada, and we put tariffs on cars from Canada, and at a certain point, it won't make economic sense for Canada to build those cars. And we don't want steel from Canada because we're making our own steel, and we're having massive steel plants being built right now as we speak. We really don't want Canadian steel, and we don't want Canadian aluminum and various other things because we want to be able to do it ourselves. And we, because of, past thinking of people, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. In other words, they have a surplus with us. And there's no reason for us to be subsidizing Canada. Canada's a place that will have to be able to take care of itself economically. I assume they can. I will tell you that Trudeau, when I spoke to him, I used to call him Governor Trudeau. I think that probably didn't help his election. But when I spoke to him, I said, so why are we taking your cars? Why are we taking we want to make them ourselves. I mean, I said, and if the price of your cars went up, or if we put a tariff on your cars of 25%, what would that mean to you? He said, that would mean the end of Canada. He actually said that to me. And I said, that's a strange answer, but I understand his answer. But no, I mean, it's hard to justify subsidizing Canada to the tune of maybe $200 billion a year. We protect Canada militarily, and we always will. We're going to, that's not a money thing. But we always will. But, it's not fair. But why are we subsidizing Canada $200 billion a year, or whatever the number might be? It's a very substantial number. And it's hard for the American taxpayer to say, gee whiz, we love doing that.
Now, about Canada becoming the 51st state, here's what Trump said, number 31.
President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state. Were you chosen?
No. Well, I still believe that, but it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said that's the way it was meant to be. But I do feel it's much better for Canada, but we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, the polls show that most Canadians do not want a merger with us. And the man sitting right next to Donald Trump, Mark Carney, the new prime minister, referred to the idea of Canada becoming America's 51st state as crazy. He said, quote, "We will never, ever in any way, shape, or form be part of the United States. America is not Canada." And in the new prime minister's acceptance speech, he said, quote, "The Americans want our resources, our water, our land, our country. If they succeed, they will destroy our way of life," end of quote. We discussed this a little bit yesterday. As far as I'm concerned, the question is not what America would do to Canada if it were to become part of America. The question is, what would Canada do to America? There is a think tank in Canada called the Fraser Institute. It's a free market think tank. And in May of last year, the Fraser Institute talked about the decline that's taking place in Canada. Quote, "The experience following the second quarter 2019 is unlike any decline and recovery since 1985 because though per-person GDP recovered for one quarter, it immediately began declining again and remains below the level in quarter 2 2019. The Institute said, and I'm quoting them, "This lack of meaningful recovery suggests that since mid-2019, Canada has experienced one of the longest and deepest declines in real GDP per person since 1985, exceeded only by the decline in recovery from second quarter 1989 to the third quarter 1994. If per capita GDP does not recover, this period may be the longest and largest decline in per person GDP over the last 4 decades." And in May 2024, the Canadian newspaper The Finance Post wrote, quote, "Measure Canada's gross domestic product by aggregate and it doesn't look so bad, but measure it by per person or per capita and it's dismal. Not only does Canada lag behind most developed economies, Canadian provinces also far behind almost all U.S. states." It went on to say Ontario last year had a per-person level of economic output similar to Alabama. The maritime provinces were below Mississippi, and Quebec and Manitoba lag behind West Virginia. Quote, "Incomes in West Virginia level. House prices are Los Angeles level. Canadian taxes are halfway to the Soviet Union. It is not rare for a middle-class family in Canada to pay half their income in taxes. Since the pandemic, official food inflation up 25%, energy up 30%. Sales tax in most Canadian provinces, 13 to 15% on everything you buy," end of quote.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.